If you can be like water and change your own way of dealing with things according to who you're dealing with and the environment, just like water, it changes to ice when it's cold or snow when it's cold, or it can be a tsunami if it has something that needs to tsunami, or it can go over rocks and rivers if there's a barrier. If it can be just like water to change yourself to adapt to environment and be a chameleon, you can excel in out with any leaders.
Welcome back to another episode of The Leader Within. Today, I'm excited to introduce Wilma Li, CEO of Business Knowledge Integration, Inc., and a certified executive and leadership coach with over 30 years of experience leading cross-functional teams. Given her experience and passion for leveraging cross-cultural inclusion, DEI, HR, and change management in guiding leadership and executive transformation, I'm excited to have her share her insights with you. Well, welcome, Wilma. So you've owned multiple businesses, worked in 9 or so different careers, and across 10 different industries. On top of all that, you have extensive leadership experience. So can you share with us a story that has shaped the trajectory of your career?
When I was younger, I moved from Hong Kong. I was born and raised in Hong Kong to the States, lived there for 3 years, and then moved back to Hong Kong for another few years before my whole family decided to move to Vancouver, BC, Canada. So went through that multiple culture shock, including curriculum shock in terms of education, really helped me got interested in multiculturalism. And because of that, that got me to travel to over 29 countries now. And through those travel experiences, I really realized if only every culture could understand each other and be more inclusive towards each other, there'll probably, hopefully, be less wars going on also as well. So that really got me to be interested in that. And through my decades of work experience, professional experience, realizing that there's so much at play culturally, especially if someone gets judged based on their appearance, not knowing, even though they may look Indian, for example, but they're actually raised in the UK, which is completely different cultural background than traditional East Indian, for example, that can really play a part also in too much stereotyping can lead to retention issue in organizations. So when I saw that during my professional years working as a leader and also as an individual contributor, I realized, oh, you know what? This is a gap that the society and the work itself, the working environment has. So that's why I thought, okay, you know what? I can combine all of my years of experience, including my life traveling and the different cultural shock that I have experienced, and really contribute to coach leaders, especially particularly senior leaders, executives, how to really change that and be more inclusive culturally and equitably so that it can escalate downwards to the entire organization and have a bigger impact. And that's how I got into doing what I'm doing today.
I want to dive a little bit into that leadership piece. Given all the experiences that you've gained, what would you say is like one of the biggest leadership epiphanies you've had to date, whether it's through that multicultural exposure or it's just working in different industries? How has it shaped you as a leader?
The epiphanies of all that experience is really about having that partner in crime. What I mean by partner in crime, not necessarily a romantic partner. What I mean by like a executive coach, someone that you can be a sounding board, a strategic partner. I wish I had that when I was a leader. If I had that executive coach or leadership coach while I'm growing in my career, I would probably be in a very different place much sooner than I am now, right? Even it would be great to have that in school now, education system, to have that cultural coach or a leadership coach to help you through all that. That would be fantastic. And to basically, so that they'll guide you along the way to really question and challenge you in terms of your unconscious bias, gender bias, which oftentimes stems from childhood, even question your own gremlin or inner critic or inner judge. If we were able to have that heightened self-awareness from an early age, we would all be very different people today.
And hey, even though you didn't have that coach, you are that coach to a lot of leaders now. And it ties into the topic that I want to focus on with you is just around boosting leadership capacity and effectiveness, especially in times of change. And one of those changes that you had mentioned and alluded to is like during transitions when executives team changes and everything. So you might have had a career plan that was in alignment with their style. And then once they move on, suddenly sometimes you're starting from scratch. So I would love to kind of hear your thoughts on how can an executive or a leader manage that transition and take that step back and be like, okay, maybe this is something I need to take into consideration?
Yeah, that's a great question, because oftentimes when there are leadership change, which happens lots in this globalized world, that leaders can change often. And with that, you have to adapt all over again, right, to a new leader. In terms of the strategies that I would really suggest is having that beginner's mindset, right? Making sure that you establish a rapport, get to know your leader, what kind of leader they are right off the bat, to build those quick wins really quickly, to establish that, even though, yes, you may be in that role for very much a long time, but yet the new leaders new, so they take the time to know you. They need to take that time. But at the same time, if you just show them right away the quick wins, it might be much easier for them to trust you much faster also as well, to build that rapport. It's also, I usually have the saying, just like quoted from Bruce Lee, be like water. If you can be like water and change your own way of dealing with things according to who you're dealing with and the environment, just like water, it changes to ice when it's cold, or snow when it's cold, or it can be a tsunami if it has something that needs to tsunami, or it can go over rocks and rivers if there's a barrier. If it can be just like water, to change yourself to adapt to environment and be a chameleon, you can excel in any with any leaders if you can be willing to change yourself to adapt to that person's personality and way of being and leadership style also as well.
I appreciate that visual. And one question that comes to mind is, with certain leaders and certain individuals, you're always going to have that organic chemistry right away. You just click, you just understand each other, working style, whatever it may be, and it's hard to describe, right? So when you have a new executive come in where you may be known for your results, but for some reason you just don't click, and then for some reason that likability shifts, how do you manage that?
That can sometimes happen, not often, but that can sometimes happen when there's not really, doesn't feel like an automatic click, like we all have with different individuals we meet on a daily basis even. When that happens, usually oftentimes it's to really suspend that judgment and assumption, but going in, creating that one-on-one conversation with that leader to really flush out, hey, to really have the common goal of, hey, you just want to build a rapport with you and want to make sure we have a great working relationship. How can I support you so that you can succeed sooner than later? Knowing that intent to a leader is, volumes of care for them, because can you imagine any leader that, or anybody that started a new role for that matter, the first 3 months or 6 months, they're still trying to grasp about the culture, the working environment, the people. If you're willing to lend a hand to make them look good and be the leader they're supposed to be and be themselves, and you're able to help them, but yet let them know your intent is to build a rapport with them so that the team wins, not just for yourself, but for them as well. Usually with that clarity of communication, most leaders will go, oh, great. Some leader may go, oh, you know what? Give me a few weeks to read over everything, to meet everybody. Then we'll get back to you on that. But overall, you're doing great, right? Some leaders will tell you that because they need that time. Some leaders will be like, oh my God, great. Here's something you can help me with and tell me who I should watch out for and things, et cetera, right? So it's really rapport building, having that clear communication and that authenticity about you also as well, that can really shine through in those kind of communication.
It's really helpful. And then I guess on the flip side of thing is like, what usually gets in the way of that leader when navigating a transition like this? Is there a common theme that you've noticed? Or
yeah, for leaders, definitely a lot of things to juggle. It's not easy for any leader because you're managing up, you're managing laterally, you're managing downwards also as well, but at the same time managing yourself first and foremost in the meantime. Oftentimes in terms of to manage all that, it's really having that sense of boundary setting, right? Let your new manager know, hey, what is their expectation within the first 90 days so that you know what their expectations are first 90 days for your new manager, whoever that leader reports to, who's a direct line manager. At the same time, while you do that, you want to make sure to set expectation with your team member that what you need from them during this beginning of a new position, and also laterally as well, right? So you set those expectations and boundaries so that they don't all come to you at once within the first, 30 days and then inundate you so that you don't have capacity to even be mindful of fleshing out the details, meeting everyone getting the quick wins in. It's all about the higher up you go in the corporate ladder, the more boundaries you need to set so that you have the capacity to be mindful. You have the capacity to choose to respond rather than react as if it's a reflex. Because that's the danger of it, is when you react, you may not want to say what you wanted to say in the first place. You just want to make sure you're mindful. You have time to center yourself, to be calm and collected, so that you can choose how to respond properly to every situation as well.
Okay, so speaking of the boundaries piece, you're new to a role, you're new to an organization, you want to do as much as you can to create those quick wins, but then you teeter into being that yes person. You say yes to too much because you want to make everyone happy, forgetting that, like you said, if you don't watch that, your capacity is going to go out the window and therefore your performance will be negatively impacted. So what's a piece of advice or just a reflection question that you usually offer those new leaders or new executives when they're leaning into that role to be like, hey, maybe consider this before you accidentally become that yes person to everything?
I actually coach a lot of executives who is actually doing that in terms of saying yes to everything, tell everything I'm thinking that they have to do it all because they were hired that role to do it all, right? It's always the reminder of you have a team. As long as they have a team, if they're individual contributors, different thing, okay? But if they have a team, they hire them for the competencies. There's a learning curve to learn to let go, to build the trust to let go, so that they're not in the doing as much as they're on the business in terms of being strategic, not working in the nitty-gritty. But it takes time to let go of that trust and be able to trust your team members that they can do the work for you, but set the expectation and mentor them what your expectations are, what the boundaries are, and get them to touch base with you, not micromanaging, but in midpoint or 1/3 of the way, say, hey, you know what, send me the draft of something so I can figure, to point you in the right direction, so that they're not at the end of it, show you the final product and go, oh, this is not what I want to go. To guide them along the way, but at the same time is to also making sure that when you're dealing with all that, be mindful that, okay, if you're doing that, then what can you do in the meantime to manage up also as well and laterally, right? And to know what capacity that you have in your personal life, because it all are connected. Yes, you're executive, but we all have a life. If there's certain things you cannot do, I always suggest my executives to align it with your vision and your mission, be it 1 year from right now or 5 years or 10 years. With the pandemic, a lot of executives are learning not to go too far ahead in terms of 10 years because you never know what happened. So now, very common amongst all my executives is to plan things for max 3 to 5 years ahead. Some even think like they cannot see it. Just plan 1 year or 2 years ahead and see what's your vision in 2 years' time, where you want to go. Prioritize what's important to you in your life and career and make your decision according to that prioritization of your vision. And then you can say, okay, if that's the case, I'll do more prioritization where I align with my vision where I want to be. The ones that doesn't align, question yourself. Does it matter in 5 months, 5 years, or even does it matter in 5 minutes? If it doesn't matter in 5 months, you may want to delegate it. If it's 5 minutes, you definitely want to outsource it or don't do it. Right? But the ones that are more important, like the ones that will matter in 5 months' time, yes, you definitely want to focus, which some people also call it the money exercise. Or you quantify all your tasks personally and professionally in terms of $10,000 worth, $1,000 worth, $100 worth, or $10 worth. The ones that are $10 worth, either you let go, don't do it, or you outsource it. So when they're 100, you may be able to also outsource it or delegate it. The $1,000 worth, depending on where you are in the corporate ladder, you may need to do it yourself or to ask a teammate, to influence a teammate to help you with it. The $10,000 one are the ones that you need to focus on. So that's how you can really know when to say yes and when to say no and when to delegate and when to outsource. Also, both personally and in your professional life also do.
I love that exercise. That's the first time I've heard of it. And speaking of prioritizing, because sometimes when you get caught up in the doing as a leader, you lose sight of, okay, what do we actually need to prioritize? What do I need to deflect off of my team and say, hey, you know what, if that's not a $10,000 or $1,000 exercise, whatever, weight to that activity, we need to pause because it doesn't make sense for us to keep on hiring extra resources for doing things that aren't fully moving the needle to where we need to move the needle towards. So when you are coaching leaders, what would you say is something that they have been able to adopt to be like, okay, let's pause so that we can go in the right direction, doing high impact stuff instead of just going full speed ahead and making a very minimal impact that we otherwise would have been making?
So there's usually two questions I challenge my executive side coach. One is, how is this helping you to get to your vision or goal by the end of the year, whichever it is, right? Or if it's shorter term, 3 months from now, then they usually realize, maybe not, right? Or, oh yeah, maybe I should expedite this or make it later. The other question I ask is, talking to get you to do this. When I say who's talking, because we all have that inner critic, inner voice in us, or inner judge or gremlin, whichever term you want to use, those are all synonyms for it, that tells within our head that we're not blank enough, whatever the adjective is, be it good enough, smart enough, fit enough, thin enough, whatever you want to put in adjectives. When I ask who is talking, if you realize that who is actually your inner critic, whatever name you give that inner critic or gremlin or inner judge, if that person is the one that's talking to tell you what to do, then it's not really you that's talking. It's your fear that's talking. Fear is what creates that inner critic. And also fear is also create that inner judge and gremlin also as well, right? So when they realize, oh, okay, it's actually my inner critic talking, maybe I shouldn't be listening to it. Right? Because inner critic really stems from our childhood. The intent was to protect us when we're younger. But when we're older and we're wiser in our adult years, it actually helps if you can change that negative protection energy into more propelling you forward, into more of a cheerleader to propel you forward to do the things rather than holding you back because of fear and not do it. Yeah, so hope that answers your questions.
Does. And even that fear piece, because I think one of the things that I've noticed with leaders in itself is when you talk about that inner piece is you put a lot of pressure on yourself at times, right? Because you want to make sure that you can be the best for blank, whether it's in your personal life, for your team, for the people you report to, the board, whoever it may be. Leaders already have enough pressure on their shoulders, and then this internal pressure is added on there. Sometimes the bar externally is set, for those who can't see, at maybe 100. But then you somehow have created this bar to be set at 150. So then your perception of reality all the time should be at 150 when everyone's expectations of you is only at 100. So how do you kind of bring that awareness towards, okay, like, you know what? I'm actually doing great. I'm doing my best, and then manage it that way.
That's actually come up quite often in coaching sessions with a lot of the leaders I coach, because of the fact that when they were promoted based on how great they are doing what they do, based on their competencies. The problem with that is once you get to a level where you're leading a team or a group, their competencies may not train you to be a good leader or good manager or good executives. It really just train you to be a really good individual contributor. So oftentimes we're promoted based on our competencies, but yet there wasn't one that based on because you're a good leader. Sometimes there is. Don't get me wrong, there are companies out there that are doing that as well. But right now, majority of cases because they're promoted based on competencies. So because of that, a lot of leaders will think, oh, because I'm promoted by competencies, I need to do 150% to prove even more that I could be in this role. But then at the same time, there's usually an imposter syndrome. That's like, oh, I'm promoted on this, but yet, I feel like an imposter. I shouldn't be a leader because I never was taught to be a leader. And because of that underlying imposter syndrome, a lot of leaders tend to do way more than necessary to prove themselves that they're not an imposter. So oftentimes the question comes through is, why do you think you need to do 150% of a regular leader? Why do you think you need to work 12 hours, 10 hours days? What are you trying to prove? And not just that, what is that doing to your life, personal life? And when those questions start, the leader then realizes, I'm not really having much of a personal life. Either, oh, yeah, I didn't realize that it's an underlying imposter syndrome or bias that I have because I saw my line manager working 14 hours a day. I thought I need to work 14 hours a day to be in that position, which they can have the authority to change that. but they didn't realize that just because they've been modeling the behavior of predecessors also as well. So oftentimes it's asking those empowering open-ended questions towards themselves, or have a coach ask that also as well. That will really help them to think through, why are they doing what they're doing? There are better ways to do it. Or why do you think there's a bias there that you need to work 14 hours, 12-hour days to be an executive? Which there's no books in the world that can tell you that you do need to work that long to be executive.
Okay, so speaking of that bias piece, and those questions are really helpful, by the way. It hit the core, I think, when you even talked about just how does this impact your personal life? Because we are human beings that are multifaceted. We are not just created to work all the time. And so when you let go of some of those meaningful relationships or things that kind of fill your cup so that you can effectively show up, it's really important to take that step back. Right? So again, going towards that bias piece, I know one of your biggest strengths is being able to turbocharge intercultural synergy. So what does this look like when an organization is navigating change and transition? How do you leverage this as a superpower to get you through that time?
So a lot of times when they go through massive transition in a organization, massive change, oftentimes it's the cultural piece that most people are needing to know that it's needing to be changed, right? When there's a massive change, the culture piece is most important. But yet, statistics show, a lot of research shows that culture change usually takes minimum 3 years. Some people will tell you it's 1 year. Not really if it's organizational wide. If it's the team, maybe much sooner. Organizational wide, especially if it's a global company, it does take usually 3 years for culture change, and it's not easy. The key, especially in global organization or organizations that have multicultural, be it on the surface, like appearance, multicultural, or inner multicultural. What I mean by that is, hey, they may look white or Caucasian, but if they have grown up in Hong Kong, or they've grown up in China or East India or Eastern Europe, very different culture than North American culture, right? So you have to get to know what their cultural backgrounds are in order to really define what their true cultures are, other than from their appearance. So oftentimes is that knowing that difference in culture and also knowing the globalization of the organization, how do you use strategies in intercultural communication to tailor to each culture differently for communication, for getting buy-ins, for addressing resistors also as well, which every change has its own resistors. Because just like, for example, the change management model from ProSci, which is the ADKAR model, which really stands for you have to have the awareness in order for there to be a desire for change. And then even if you have the desire, if you don't have the knowledge to change, you won't have the ability to change to get the results of the change that you want. That really is the ADKAR model, right? So if the resistors are resisting, what path in that ADKAR model were they resisting? Was it no awareness? Was it no desire, no knowledge, no ability? So when you flush that out and knowing, okay, if there's no knowledge, is it cultural knowledge or is it something else? So that's where the cultural piece come into play a lot, depending on the dynamics of the team within the organization and where they come from in terms of their cultural background, truly understanding the cultural background, not just from on the surface appearance, and then using cultural tactics and strategies, help them mitigate the change and get lots of buy-ins, so that everyone goes through the culture change together and any organizational change together as a whole, as a team as well.
A great way to highlight that through the ADKAR model as well, right? Because sometimes we forget that everyone navigates that change curve differently. So if we don't take a step back to be like, okay, where is everyone at? And then we bring them along the same marathon or whatever it may be that we're going down, you're going to lose a lot of people along the way, or they're going to be working on something that is not in alignment with what you need them to, right? So as we slowly wrap up our conversation, when it comes to unleashing the potential of individuals and organizations, what's the first thought that comes to mind for you?
Your first thought to unleash that potential, it comes down to true, genuine support from everyone around that employee, be it a leader or the employee or the executive. What I mean by all around support is if they need a coach, tailor it to their needs, get a coach for them. If they just want to do training, having metrics to measure if the training is even successful, right? Because of the forgetting curve by Ebbinghaus, psychologists from Germany, 90% of the training that they learn within a week is already lost. So if it's training, it's a good investment in the training. if you don't pair it with coaching or something that's more sustainable, like a pure cohort training, even they can learn from each other, which helps to sustain the learning too, or a combination of all the above, right? To help them retain that knowledge to grow, but to also have someone to mentor also as well, in addition to a coach, in addition to training, that all inclusive, but tailored to each employee's needs, the better, because the more support they feel, the more they can grow their potential. If they don't have that, it's almost like the traditional education system where everybody is so different. But if you give them the same curriculum for everyone, they may not learn the same. I remember a comic pictorial of a class of zoo animals, and then they're teaching you how to climb a tree. A giraffe can't climb a tree. A goldfish can't climb a tree. We're like that comic pictorial also as well, in that we're all different. Yes, we're all human beings, but we all have different needs. The way we learn is different. What we want to learn is different. Then why not tailor the employees' needs based on their own needs?
I love that that comic that you just brought up there, because it's true, right? When we take that specific example, we're like, yeah, well, it makes sense that a goldfish can't climb a tree, but we don't really use that contextually in the workplace. So the last question that I have for you is, what's one thing that's top of mind for you, especially if someone who's looking to reach out and connect with you and be intentional about it instead of spraying and praying? How can they be intentional with what's top of mind for you?
The thing is to really know or talk with someone like myself, a coach or a consultant or a trainer, to see where the gaps are right now in the organization. Do a gap analysis to see where they are at, why they're having issues in certain parts of the organization, and then what's needed, what a comprehensive, holistic way to address that gap to help that employee or help that team or group, right? To really further and tailor it to that group, not just a cookie cutter, hey, I have the training package, here you go, just replicate it. Not really that, but really understand the cultural dynamics and diversity within your organization to know what really are the gaps. If you don't know the gaps, hire a professional to do so, right? To help you assess it, and then make it tailored by having those group sessions, or team training that it combines with coaching, combines with mentoring, combined with having a champion in the organization to champion them, to unblock any barriers they have in the employee's life also as well, career. And all that combined to make the employee feel supported and that they're invested in, so that they will want to stay in the organization to grow rather than jump ship.
I appreciate you sharing that, and it gives individuals a lot to think about, right, when it coming to you. So, Wilma, thank you so much for sharing your story and your insights. I really appreciate it. And to everyone else that's tuned in to another episode, thank you so much for your time and attention. It means more to me than you know, and I can't wait to stay in touch with you on my next episode. Till then, stay safe.